So let's talk about the Blazor WebAssembly project that runs C# inside a browser. But before that, my wife gets pregnant lately. TMI. Anyway, I am so excited, but there was one problem for me. Buying fish was tricky because I don't know what to buy or what not to buy. The information is there in FDA website on a fishcard. It's not friendly for search. But hey, I am an engineer, so I'm just going to build one. This is how it looks like. We go to fishcard.codewizard.net. You should be able to see the live site. There I can search for different type of fish, big-eye tuna for example, and I get back to the suggestion but do not eat it during the pregnancy. And if I punch in a random character, I'm going to get multiple results. I am going to create a series of videos talking about how to build this fish card. And I am going to teach you everything that is needed for you to build something similar from the front end to the back end, step by step. Okay, I started with the front end and I picked Blazor, specifically Blazor WebAssembly. And that is the Microsoft technology to run C# code inside a browser without using any plugin. Well, hello Silverlight. Anyway, and in today's video, I want to lay down some foundation. You're going to learn how to create a Blazor WebAssembly project. We're going to use the template coming with the .NET 6 CLI. We're going to do a little bit code editing with VSCode. You're going to see the code up and running. And then we're going to talk about the debugging. Well, first thing first, you need a proper version of .NET SDK installed. It is version 6 on my box. Because Blazor WebAssembly as a technology is being actively developed, I suggest you always use the latest version of the SDK. And as you can see, I have a lot of versions installed. And 6.0.302 is the version I am using today. If yours are old, and you want to get the latest version, go to .NET to download the latest version and install it. If you need help with that, I have a video that I'm going to link on the right up corner that hopefully will be helpful. Once we have the SDK, let's check the existing templates. The template that we are interested in is this Blazor WebAssembly app. Let's create a project with that template. .NET new Blazor WASM -n here stands for the name for the project, and -o for the output folder. Give it a dot, meaning current folder. Okay, the project is created. Let's take a peek at the files that is generated by the templates inside VSCode. I installed VSCode Portable for this demo, just to simulate a clean installation, so that we can go over the first time experience together. Now this is a very clean version, there's no plugins, no extensions installed whatsoever, and the version number is 170. You don't have to match the exact version number, but this is the version that I am using. Now let's open the folder of our project. Now of course I trust the author for this folder, because it's me. Now once we start to navigate through some files, VSCode is going to recommend some extensions to install. The first one, of course, is C#. The second one usually would be this Blazor WebAssembly debugging extension. And I believe this is required to debug the app inside VSCode. I have an issue here. Later, when we talk about debugging, I'm going to explain more about it. Let's get it installed anyway. And the third prompt is about those files in .vscode folder. Those are JSON files used by VSCode to generate build tasks or launching tasks. Now let's check the extensions installed. This is interesting. I was expecting 2 of them, and I got 3. If you know when and why this .NET install tool for extension authors is installed, please leave a comment below to let us know. Now let's go back to the files generated by the template. I like to check the files in the source control. It gives me a sense of how many files has changed. And for newly created project, that's pretty much everything. It looks like there are quite a few. I'm wondering if we are going to commit in more than needed. Here I see files in the obj folder. Those can be built and generated every time. We don't need to check those files into source control. We need a gitignore file for it. There is actually a template for it. Here's how to use it. Let's bring up the terminal, and we type .NET new gitignore, and the file number reduced to 32. Okay, I think those are everything that's supposed to be checked into source control. Let's write a message and commit it. Next, let's go over the Blazor files in the project briefly. I'm going to go really quick because we're going to eventually recreate the files by ourselves. Firstly, you see there are 3 pages: counter, fetch data, and index. There are some razor tags in each of them, and when we run the app, we will land on index first. And then we can check out the counter and the fetch data one by another. There's also the program.cs, and that's the beginning logic of the WebAssembly host. Now let's run the app. Oops, this is not the correct folder. Let's firstly change our current directory into source frontend, and let's run .NET run there. As you can see, the application is hosted on localhost 7283. Now, if you press down Control on your keyboard, and then you click on the URL, it will bring it up in the browser. Here we go. This is the index, the counter, and fetch data. Well, if you are following the steps to do that on your own box, don't worry about the details at this moment. Pay attention to how did we set the application up and running. Now I'm going to show you how to mess around the project so that you get some feelings how things work here. Let's come back to VSCode, shut down the host by press Ctrl+C. Then let's come to the counter page. Let's update the logic for increment count. For example, instead of increasing the number once, here I'm going to increase it twice. Now let's run the app again. Oh, before that, we need to save the changes. Now let's run it. Coming back to the counter page, whenever the button is clicked, the counter now increased by 2. And that's basically the workflow. Oh, by the way, there is a very useful trick. Although it is not Blazor specific, I still want to show you. Coming back to VSCode, here I'm going to show you why I would eagerly check everything into source control. That is, when I mess things up, there's always a baseline that I can see the diff. In this instance, appending the line 17 was my intention, so I'm going to stage and then commit it. But if I spotted any unwanted change, I could go ahead and discard it. And that capability helps me learn new things so much quicker. Now let's talk about debugging. Quick question, what are the most 3 important skills a good developer should have? They are debugging, debugging, and debugging. Well, just kidding. However, debugging is important. That is especially true when we are learning new stuff that we are not familiar with. When you see something wrong, set a breakpoint or output a log. And we're going to show you how to do that in Blazor. It takes an effort. Fortunately, there's documentation. Unfortunately, by following the documentation like the one I'm showing on the screen, I still cannot get it work inside VS Code. After trying things for a few hours, debugging inside the browser eventually worked for me on both Edge and Chrome. So I'm going to show you how to set a breakpoint inside the browser for Blazor WebAssembly application. And if I figure out how to debug it inside VSCode in the future, I am going to make a separate video, and I'm going to link it up here. But for now, I'm going to give you a reliable way to debug it inside your browser. The click me button increases the number by 2. Let's pretend that we want to find out why. So we want to debug the code. The first step, while the application is in focus, press down on keyboard, Shift, Alt, D. In theory, you should be able to do Alt, Shift, D as well. But on my machine, I have a weird hotkey conflict that Alt, Shift has been assigned to switch my input method. So I guess the most reliable way, Shift, Alt, D. Once you click it, there's going to be a new tab showing up. And usually, you're going to see an arrow like this. This is because usually the debugging mode for your browser is turned off. And on the page, actually, it's instructions how to turn it on. There's one long line if you want to use Chrome, and the other if you want to use Edge. I'm going to use Chrome just for an example. Now I use Windows plus R to bring up the run dialog, paste in the command line, and run it. This new dialog on the left half of the screen, that is the Chrome in debugging mode, and I'm going to maximize it. Now in this window, we will need to do Shift Alt D again. Another new tab, except this time, we do see the DevTools. We want to see in our C# code, and it is in the sources panel. Let's bring up the navigator. Here you'll see the page tab. Open this file, ://. Do you see something that is familiar? Here we go to the counter.razor. That's a line the code we've been looking for. What we can do is then to put a breakpoint there and go back to our application. Once we click the button, you'll see this posting debugger banner. Back to the DevTools. Here's our breakpoint. There, you could choose to step into, step out, step over. We have a watch window, we have a local. You can see the value of current count changed from 9 to 10 as we move code forward. And if we say wrong, it will resume the execution to the end. Now, you could totally organize the windows a little bit by drag the tab out of the window and organize the panels a little bit. I don't think the debugging experience is as good as inside an IDE like VSCode or Visual Studio, but this is better than nothing, and personal opinion, once you get used to it, it's not that bad. And last but not least, if you just want something quick and dirty, use Console.WriteLine. Here's what I mean. Let's close all these debugging instances. Come back to VSCode. Oops, while I move a few lines, it looks like the symbols are out of sync with the source code. The way I notice it, the reference link on top of each method is gone, and I lost the IntelliSense or the code completion for the line of code that I'm typing. This does happen for me every once in a while, and I find that to reload the window usually gets the problem resolved. Here you press F1, type in reload window, and enter. It will usually take a couple of seconds for the compiler to catch up. Here we go. And we have a missing semicolon. Well, the red squiggles is still there, but I suspect there's nothing wrong with it. Let's build the project to confirm. Yep, the build succeeded without error. Now let's see what happens when it runs. Let's come to the counter, click the button once, press F11. Now notice this is the normal browser dev tool. This is not the one that's brought up by Shift-Alt-D. And when you go to the console panel, you're going to see the output by Console.WriteLine. Current count 2, click me twice, and we see 4 and 6. And that's how we leverage Console.WriteLine for logging. Alright everyone, I hope you like it. Give me a thumb up to let me know. We're going to talk about paging and routing in Blazor next time. I'll put the link here on the screen when it is available. Subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss it. And keep coding, keep improving. I'll see you in the next one. Until then, take care. Blazor Web Assembly project. Blazor Web Assembly, Blazor Web Assembly. Okay, I'm gonna just call it a Blazor project. Well, second thing, I'm not. No. What's the most important? What's the top 3? You're gonna see the output by Console.Route. We're gonna talk about paging and routing in Blazor.